My story, The Coffin Path, a light quake dirge, came from spending a lot of time in the North York moors. I became really ill with chronic fatigue syndrome 6 years ago, and I spent a lot of time at my mum's. She lives just south of the North York moors, and we would often she would drive us through, and I just got a lot of inspiration from this incredibly dramatic landscape and was really interested in reading about coffin paths, and a particular coffin path that went over the North York moors to the coast. Coffin paths were exactly what they say. They were to carry a coffin over to a church for burial, and I just thought that was really evocative. And A Light Quake Dirge, which is the song that appears in the story, is a traditional Yorkshire song, very much about the journey from life to death. I trained as a musician, so I'm a composer and a performer and a producer, and I can't help but have my music and my words completely intertwined. I try and keep them separate, but it doesn't happen. So with this story, it was the traditional Yorkshire song, A Light Quake Dirge, that fed into the writing. And there are three sisters who are carrying a coffin across the moor, and they sing this song, but the song has an important narrative quality and reveals more as it goes along. But yeah, words and music are completely intertwined, and I compose music that is almost exclusively vocal, so is always setting texts. So that's that way around, and the writing just can't help either being inspired by folk songs or inspired by piano music, classical music, jazz. Pretty much everything is in there. Just can't help it. One of the things I have learned in my long and continuing recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome is to let go of perfectionism. So when I was first writing, I would write something and then edit over it until I got it as good as I could. There would still be more editing to come. But these days, an important part of my writing process is just to be really instinctive. I tend to think that some of the best things I create are the things that I create straight away without worrying about it, with a sort of playful and quite free feeling. And so that's my tip. If you're writing, is to really worry about editing later, and just splurge, just type or free write and see what comes out, and things can be shaped and honed later on. I personally read my work aloud. I didn't so much in the early stages of my writing 10 years ago, but I have found, I suppose, especially because I work a lot with writing for singers, I just feel like there's a performative element to writing, in it being read aloud. Not all writers think this. I know some novelists who have no interest in reading their work aloud as they're working on it, but some do, and I'm definitely one of them. I think you can hear the rhythm rather better when you're reading aloud than when you're just looking at it on a page, and rhythm is so important for a reader. Even when they're reading it on the page, you catch things that you might not catch if you're just reading the words on your screen or on a page. I also notice repetitions. If I've repeated a word too much, I often don't see it, but I can hear it. So I personally really recommend reading work aloud. I remember hearing that the novelist Claire Fuller reads her work over and over again, like maybe 60 times, until she's absolutely happy with it. So I say go for it. I feel like if you've written a short story and you feel good enough about it, you might as well enter it for a competition. I've entered loads of short story competitions, and this is the first one I've won. I'm so unbelievably chuffed about that. But it's definitely not for want of trying, and I just really recommend that if you feel good about your story, check the word count, of course, but get it in to the appropriate competition, because you never know. And so many competitions are for a mixture of published and unpublished emerging writers, and it's such a good form. The short story form is just so good for being able to experiment with style and tone, but without committing to that style or tone for the length of a novel. So it gives you that platform to really play and to really experiment. And I guess that's what I love about the short story. The Coffin Path, my winning story, is not a tone that I would want to sustain for a whole novel, but it feels like it works well enough for the shorter form.